Hey everybody, it is Trags, and this week on Red Sox Beat, I welcome back old friend Alex Barth of 98.5, the Sports Hub in Boston, covering all things Boston for the Sports Hub, including your hometown nine, the Boston Red Sox, who are in the midst of capturing a playoff spot, a wild card spot in the American League. How you doing, Alex?
I'm good. It's fun, right? This is what we all said at the beginning of the year, like, hey, just give us meaningful baseball in September. And I don't remember the last time that the teams that are involved, how many teams that are involved, how close it is that we got to, up close here in Boston, see a pennant race like this.
Really? And you know what? I break out my handy dandy standings, and they tell me that the Red Sox, believe it or not, are 6.5 games behind the Tampa Bay Rays with just about 2 weeks remaining. Look, I don't think they're going to catch Tampa Bay. They would have to have a Philadelphia Phillies 1964-esque, for any of those old folks out there who remember. They would have to have that kind of collapse for the Red Sox to catch them. So I think the Red Sox are really resigned to the fact that they will be playing in a one-game playoff. What they want to avoid, of course, are two things. They want to avoid playing in two one-game playoffs. And secondly, they want to have that wild card game if they're forced indeed to play in the wild card game. They want that game at Fenway Park.
Yeah, I think that actually makes a huge difference. Just the way this team has played home versus road this year. And I think if you do, and we'll see what, Chris Sale's availability is. I know that he's dealing with some COVID issues, or was dealing with some COVID issues. If he's available, you want him pitching at Fenway Park. You want that lefty at Fenway Park. That's the best advantage the Red Sox can have without factoring in the opponent, right? Whether it's the Yankees or Oakland or the Jays, I'm sure we'll get into that. But you want one game, got to have it, whatever the scenario, wild card game, game 7. You want Chris Sale on the mound, and you want him on the mound at Fenway Park. And the Red Sox have an opportunity to set that up here.
They have won 25 of their last 33 games at Fenway Park. They got off, if you recall, Alex Barth, they got off to a bit of a slow start at home. They were not really dominating. But since they are now 47-29 at home, that's 18 games above 500, if my math is correct, and I think it is. And they are just about 500 away from Fenway. So obviously the advantage for the Red Sox in the one-game playoff, of course, is you have the last at bat. And we all know how much of a factor that can be at Fenway late in the game when the money is on the line.
And this team, too, we've seen how this team has played late in games this year. They, when they're feeling it, they won like 10 of their first 15 games or something in the 8th or 9th inning. Yes. I forget the exact stat. It was months ago at this point, right? And with this season, might as well be years ago. But this is a team that knows how to win close games. This is a team that can walk off when they need to walk off. So you have to feel good about that.
They are, what did I say? They are actually 37-18 in their last 55 home games.
I think you gave their season-long home record.
Correct. And they have scored 155 runs and hit 35 home runs in their last 20 home games. So that's essentially the point we're making. If the Red Sox are resigned to being in that one-game playoff, they certainly want to have that game at home and do everything in their power over these final several games. And they have 5 games remaining at home. They have the day off on Monday. They have 3 off days, Alex, in 7 days. That's remarkable at the end of the pennant stretch. And that is done, I think, what Major League Baseball was trying to do is not only account for weather, but to give these teams a chance to line up their pitching and giving the best teams the best chance to advance in the postseason.
Well, I wonder if some of it, too, is just, in case they had to move games around because of COVID, like what the NBA did, right?
I think there was some of that, but I think there was also some of the fact that they know that with so many teams vying for playoff spots, there's definitely the chance that these games can have greater significance earlier into the regular season. More games toward the end of the regular season can matter, and they don't want teams running out of pitching.
So now you have an interesting conversation here. You mentioned, what was it again? 3 off days in what? 14
7
days, 13
days.
days?
They have
3
they
and
have the
7?
off day as we record this. They have the off day
Yep.
today. They have the off day on Thursday, and they have the off day next Monday. So that's 3 off days and calendar 7 days before they open up with 3 at Baltimore and 3 in Washington to conclude the 2021 regular season.
So this is where things get really interesting, because you look at that, and let's go back to Chris Sale, right?
Yep.
You have 2 options on the table here. And I honestly, I'm back and forth on these. I don't know which one's the better route to go. It's a tough decision for Alex Cora here. You can definitely get Chris Sale the extra rest, which coming off the Tommy John, you jump at that opportunity. But there's also maybe a chance to squeeze an extra start out of him if you kind of juggle the rotation, right, with that. And I'm not going to try to do all the math right now, because it'll take up.
Pointless.
If I do it in my head, it'll take up the rest of the podcast. But the general idea is you can finagle things and probably use a 4-man rotation here for a little bit and get that extra start out of Chris Sale. The question, to me, it comes down to how much do they feel they really need it? They have the 1-game bump on Toronto right now. Do you feel comfortable with that? So it's going to be interesting to watch how they do that, because at the same time, you can line up that extra start and you want to line them up for that wild card game. I think at this point, you have to start looking towards that. You just assume you're in that game. Even if you somehow catch Tampa, great. Then you can still start Chris Sale game 1 anyway. You have to try to line him up for that wild card game. And it's, do you do it by kind of, wedging an extra start in there, or do you just give him the extra rest?
And I want to go back to Chris Sale, and knowing that he came off the disabled list on Friday, I thought he was effective enough in the win over the Baltimore Orioles. He improved to 4-0 with a 2.40 ERA and 31 strikeouts in 6 starts. Sale could pitch as many as 3 more times due to the Red Sox having 3 more off days, as you and I have both mentioned.
Yeah, and I think the big thing with him, it's good and bad. Obviously, strikeouts are strikeouts, and strikeouts are king for a reason. But I think part of the reason he was so effective against Baltimore, he only had that 1 strikeout. We saw it going back to his rehab starts, where I think it was his first one in Portland. He was at 80 pitches through, I think, 4 innings. And he struck out the majority of the hitters he faced, but strikeouts rack up that pitch count. Yep. And at a certain point, as dominant as you are, you're not going to strike every batter out on 3 pitches. And you need to kind of balance that and to a certain extent trust your fielders to just manage your pitch count. Now, I get not wanting to trust this Red Sox defense. I wouldn't trust them. It's definitely not good. No, it looks, they might as well put me out there. But anyway, I think Sale's done a better job of pitching to contact at the right times and minding his pitch count and doing a better job of getting deeper into games or setting himself up to go deeper into games. And that's a big development, because with the bullpen still sort of coming back, and we don't entirely know who this team's closer is right now. You'd like to think Matt Barnes figures it out when the season comes back, or that, Adam Ottavino gets on this run and he can continue, but you're going to need, especially in that 1-game playoff, like, you're going to need Chris Sale. You need him for more than 4 or 5 innings, which is what he was kind of doing when he first came back.
I don't know if you do, Alex. In a 1-game playoff where you need 1 game to advance to a multiple game series, you need your best pitcher to soak up 3 to 4 innings. I think a 1-game playoff is like a game 7. You're not asking for the guy to go out and throw, a 2-hitter complete game.
Right.
That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for somebody you can rely on in the opening 3 innings or 4 innings to get you off to a good start. And if he runs into any trouble whatsoever, especially when you're talking about Sale, who's coming off the Tommy John, who's looked pretty solid, strong, coming back from that, but also throw in the fact that he had to miss time due to COVID protocols, there is that to take into consideration as well. So you want your best pitcher who can handle a big game situation. The other guy, obviously, that comes to mind in my way of thinking, of course, is Nate Eovaldi. I think either one of those guys, you really can't lose starting them in a 1-game scenario. But then you go to a bullpen that I think is fairly deep, and you have some arms that could be transferred into the bullpen from the starting rotation. So I think there are a lot of different ways that Alex Cora can go. I think Matt Barnes, let's move on to Matt Barnes for a moment. Barnes,
can I just jump in real quick here? One more point.
It's a podcast, my friend.
Yeah, I think what makes this conversation really interesting, and we don't know the full story right now, so we can't fully get into it, but boy, who the ultimate, winner go home weapon would be out of the bullpen would be Garrett Whitlock.
Yeah, and you beat
now
me to the
he's
punch.
hurt.
You stole my thunder, but go ahead.
Sorry about that. Well, no, I was just gonna say, like, he's hurt. We don't, like, maybe he'll be back. Maybe he's just a little sore and he'll be back in a week, and it's all well and good. But he, this whole starting from the beginning of the season was like, wow, this guy is gonna be nails in the playoffs. You go back to what Andrew Miller was, and what was it, that 2016 run with Cleveland, I think. And they ultimately didn't win the whole thing, but they would go to him in the sixth, and he'd go boom, sixth, seventh, eighth, and just wipe everybody out. And Whitlock felt like he could be that guy.
Yeah,
and
no
maybe
question.
He still
That's
can
a great point, Alex.
Right. Maybe he still can be. Again, we don't know what the injury is. I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to sit here and tell you. But, now it's like, all right, so I guess Tanner Houck's in that role, which I really like Houck, but he wasn't pitching at the level Whitlock was. Whitlock was just so good. It would be so tough if they don't have him for that one game.
So one thing, before we talk more about Garrett Whitlock, I want to go back to you know what? Screw it. I'm going to continue talking about Garrett Whitlock, but remind me, we need to talk about what really kicked off the 5-game winning streak that the Red Sox find themselves going into the 2-game series with the Mets. Remind me about that.
Okay.
Alex. But anyway, Garrett Whitlock, Ian Brown of MLB.com reports, it wasn't a good feeling at Fenway Park on Sunday when Red Sox manager Alex Cora had to lift top reliever Garrett Whitlock, who came into the game with a 1.99 ERA in the top of the 7th due to right pectoral tightness. Whitlock did put his hand near his chest, but there wasn't much inkling that he had been indeed injured. Third baseman Rafael Devers, I find this interesting, was the one who motioned to the dugout to get the attention of Cora and the training staff. Losing Whitlock, obviously, as Ian Brown points out, for an extended period down the stretch would be just a huge blow for the Red Sox bullpen, since they've relied so heavily on the Rule 5 rookie. But Rafael Devers, noticing it and pointing it out to Alex Cora shows me one thing, Alex, that Rafael Devers is paying attention on the field. Yeah.
Yeah. It almost reminds me of, it's a little bit of a different scenario, but was it David Price, I think, was the guy, but they had some pitcher, might have been Erod, who had some mechanical issue, and Dustin Pedroia was the one who pointed it out to the pitching coach. Do you remember that?
I don't think I do remember this.
I'll type it in the Google machine real quick. But yeah, it was either Price or Erod. This was a couple years ago, obviously, because Pedroia was still playing, and he had like 3 or 4 rough starts. And then there was a report that Pedroia, I think Carl Willis was still the pitching coach, pointed it out to Carl Willis.
I remember this now.
And they fixed it.
Yep.
And it was like, all right, on one hand, it was like, all right, good, the pitcher's fix. But then on the other hand, it was like, why does the second baseman have a better read on these guys?
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because A, they're closer, and B, what does Dustin Pedroia do for a living, or did for a living? He hits pitchers. Right. He studies pitchers mechanics. That's one of the things that they do. And if they notice something, they are one of the first ones to notice, because they're looking at the picture, looking for any indication of how best to hit them. Well, that goes for your own too. And if Pedroia notices something significant, I have no problem with Pedroia, or whoever it is, pointing something out and alerting the dugout, because maybe they don't have the angle to see it, especially when you're so low in the dugout. You're not going to see it at the same angle the player will on the field.
Yeah, and I have it right here. It was Pedroia. It was David Price, 2016. Price's first year in Boston. So, yeah, no, obviously it's not a bad thing. I just, I always found that moment interesting, because it's not just that. How many guys are out there and they're focused on their own thing? So to kind of pick up that with your teammate, I think it just kind of speaks, this is totally not where we were going, but it speaks the kind of player Dustin Pedroia was with that team first approach. And he was able to do his job while still noticing what was going on with David Price and kind of letting Price know what the issue was. But it's a little different because it's an injury. It's not a mechanical issue, but just when I heard that Devers was the one who pointed it out, that was the first thing that popped in my mind, was that old Dustin Pedroia story.
Okay, we're going to wrap up Garrett Whitlock here, the right-hander. Yep. Alex Cora said the team is, gathering information on this, the off day Monday, and it's too soon to know what's going on, which I don't like the way that sounds. Because if it's not a major issue, usually the manager and the training staff know right away that it's not a big deal. But something like this with soft tissue or muscular type of injury, they have to run all the tests. They have to run MRIs, get the results back, and then make a determination. And you're talking about a compressed period of time here. You're talking essentially 12 days left in the regular season before they can get ready for the postseason. And you don't know the status of arguably your most important and reliable arm in the bullpen.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I don't know, because I do know in the playoffs, right, you basically set your roster for each round. So, once you set your 26 men for the divisional series, that's, unless somebody gets hurt, that's your roster. You can't then call somebody up. So I don't know how the wild card factors into that. If that's, if you set your roster for the wild card and then the divisional separate, but you don't necessarily get a chance to say, hey, we're going to wait and see what happens with Garrett Whitlock, and maybe we'll activate him 3 or 4 games into the series. You have to know right away. And then if he can't pitch, well, then that's a roster spot you just burned. So right. This now, a lot has to happen very quickly. And ultimately, it's whatever the injury is going to dictate the timeline. You can't, if the guy tore something, you can't just say, we're going to throw you out there in 5 days, pitch through it. But, and remember, this is a guy too, who's like Sale's coming off Tommy John. He's 2 years removed instead of 1, but is coming off Tommy John surgery as well. So you want to be careful with him. But they got a lot of decisions to make here in a short period of time when it comes to Whitlock, and crucial decisions. Cause like you said, I mean, he's the guy. He is, especially in the way teams use their bullpens in the playoffs. I'll go back to it. The Andrew Miller role. We all thought during that playoff run that was going to become a staple of pro baseball, that role in the bullpen. Now, it didn't necessarily end up transferring to the regular season. Teams don't operate that way in the regular season, not often. But it became a thing in the playoffs that role exists for every team in the playoffs. And if you don't have somebody for it, you're not going far. Whitlock was that guy in that role, in that very key role. And now you don't know if it's going to be him. And if it's not him, then who do you go to? I don't think they move Eovaldi to the bullpen. I think you need him in the starting rotation. So
I would agree with that.
Is it Houck? Is it Martin Perez, right? Like, do you try to stretch out one of your usual relievers? I would think it's Tanner Houck, but do they try to stretch out one of the other? It's just, it'll be interesting to see. Darwinzon Hernandez is a guy who's not as good, but he has that arm stamina, being a starter in the minors.
Shorter bursts with Darwinzon Hernandez.
Yeah.
That's my feeling on that. Hernandez definitely has that kind of arm. They want to use him in short bursts. They don't want to. I don't think they would at this point structure a guy like that.
No, I don't think so. I just, I have a soft spot for Darwinzon Hernandez because he was in Lowell when I was in Lowell, and that curveball tracks, let me tell you, it's awesome. It is awesome. That would, the rest of his game was still coming along. He was in low A for a reason, but that curveball, like you saw that, I would talk to scouts who were there and they were like, that curveball, get him to the bigs. Everything else has to catch up, but he'll at least get a shot at the bigs because of that curveball, because it is 80 grade elite curveball.
Chatting up 98.5, the Sports Hub fanboy, Alex Barth. Today's show is powered by the Legends brand, an athlete-owned apparel brand that is popping up seemingly everywhere these days, including many pro locker rooms and on some of today's top athletes. Legends is owned in part by athletes like Steve Nash, Matt Barnes, Baker Mayfield, NFL legend, and local icon Willie McGinnis, and even former Celtic Marcus Morris Sr., among many others. Legends makes high-performance apparel, and it's with a style and comfort you'll want to wear all day. That is a big deal these days, to have versatile sportswear outfits that you want to wear anytime, any place. Visit legends.com today and see why athletes everywhere are swapping out their big box brands for Legends apparel. Use the code SOX20, that's SOX20, and save 20% on your first order. Again, that's legends.com. Use that promo code SOX20. The offer ends October 10th. Back with, I won't call you fanboy anymore.
No, it's fine. Like, it's part of my brand.
90, yes, it is. 98.5, the Sports Hub's Alex Barth. All right. I wanted to talk about, Alex, those two games, the final two games in Seattle, where I think if the Red Sox make the playoffs and they win that wild card game, I'm going to look at those two games and the mental toughness they showed in those two games, winning them at the end of a road trip with the White Sox in Seattle, a 6-game stretch. They were 1-3 to begin that. They finish at 3-3. And just the way they finished that makes me think that they do have the mental fortitude to go at least a little distance in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about at the beginning of the show, right? The damage this team can do late in games and how that's going to be an advantage in the playoffs. They, and here I go doing math on the air again, 12 of their 17 runs they scored between those two games came in the 8th inning or later. They scored 1 in the 8th and then 5 in the 9th in that first of the two, and then 6 in the 10th.
That's why we have you on here, Alex.
Thank you. So yeah, it's that late game mentality. And that was, if I have the timeline right in my head, because again, September 14th might as well have been a month ago, but that was right around when Hunter Renfroe was on that tear, right?
Yep.
And I think he's somebody that you look at. He had 2 RBIs in that second game. Like I don't know. They're not competing for the playoffs without him right now. And I know he had a bad error in one of those games. He dropped the ball in center field, but what he's given them offensively, where, JD Martinez has really struggled in the second half here, and Xander Bogaerts missed time due to COVID, and Alex Verdugo's kind of fallen off, and they had to wait to get Schwarber going after the deadline, right? They were going to be a bat short. They still might be a bat short, but they were going to be at least one bat short definitively. And Renfroe stepped up big, and he stepped up big in the biggest moments. And he's a guy, he's playing the best baseball of his career. And on one hand, he's like, I think he's like 28, 29 years old, right? So you think, okay, here's a guy who's coming into his own and it makes sense, but you're also hanging on and, you're waiting for, is he going to drop off? And I think Hunter Renfroe is going to mean a lot to this team in the playoffs one way or the other. I think he is. And we've seen it at pockets of the regular season. We saw it on that road trip, and we'll continue to see it. If he goes as simple as one game, if he goes over 4, over 5 in that wild card game, that's a red flag. If he gets multiple hits in that wild card game, I feel confident saying they'd win it.
I mean, a red flag for what? A red flag that they're screwed in that one game? Yes.
I guess.
But a red flag that he's going to be a valuable player for this team going forward? No.
No, so I just meant in that one game. I just think in a lot of ways the offense has gone as he's gone. Even some of those better hitters seem to be – you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And I don't know. One game playoffs, look, they're so bizarre. You have heroes like Craig Counsell coming through huge in not once but twice in the World Series. And you just – I don't know. You don't know who that star is going to be in a winner-take-all type of situation. I keep going back to game. It's like a game 7. And you just don't know who's going to step forward.
I guess the way I didn't put it well. I think more so what I'm trying to say is, like you said, you kind of look there's going to be a guy. There's as much as I hate to make this comparison on a Red Sox podcast, there's going to be a Bucky Dent. There's going to be somebody who steps up who you don't expect to, whether it's a pitcher with or a Curtis Leskanic would be a much better example. There's going to be a Curtis Leskanic who comes out of nowhere, gives you that one huge inning, and it completely dictates the game. Or there's going to be somebody who comes up to the plate who you're not expecting. Mark Bellhorn hitting that home run in the Bronx, right? I don't know why I went right to Bucky Dent. There were much better examples. Anyway, Hunter Renfroe feels like a late game hero waiting to happen to me. Like that's more so what I mean is.
I think that's a good call. He's the kind of guy that if he does something big and late, Red Sox fans will say they knew all along that he was going to play a pivotal role. Everybody else on the outside will be like, Hunter Renfroe? Seriously? The guy was a reject from Tampa Bay. Couldn't make it with Tampa Bay. How did the Red Sox know? Well, the answer to that is obvious. Chaim Bloom. But how do the Red Sox manage to pick somebody off the scrap heap and put him in a situation to excel? And I think more often than not, the Red Sox should be credited for this. They do that exceptionally well, especially with some of their utility players and their reserve players, guys that go into the outfield late innings, come up with big hits or step into the void when somebody goes down with an injury.
Yeah, I mean, Brock Holt's the ultimate example of that, right? But I just, who do I want up in the ninth inning if it's a close game? I mean, you obviously go right to Rafael Devers, Xander Bogaerts, but the way he's been playing, especially in those moments, I almost feel as comfortable with Renfroe. Like, how many times, and maybe it's not all in the eighth or ninth inning, but how many times over the last 3 weeks, it's a close game, even as early as like the fifth or sixth inning, it's a close game, and then boom, Hunter Renfroe 3-1 home run. It's broken wide open. Like he's been the guy that's broken the game open for them. And you look at a 1-game playoff, you don't want to linger in a 1-game playoff. You want to get ahead of that and coast. And Renfroe's been that guy. Renfroe's been the guy to give them that. So I just, I look at that game and I look at him, and it just, the two guys really I looked at were him and Whitlock. Because how great would it be? Again, I'm going to fanboy here for a minute, if you let me.
Sure.
How great would it be for Garrett Whitlock, who the Yankees, let's remember, gave up on for nothing, beat the Yankees in the wild card game through like 4 scoreless innings in the wild card game, knocked the Yankees out of the playoffs. Adam Ottavino, who the Yankees also gave up for nothing, gets the save. Oh, that'd be sweet. It'd be beautiful. But I think offensively, who's that guy? I think it's Hunter Renfroe.
What do you think of the last, counting them up, 6 and 9, 11 games? What do they have to do to go and make the playoffs and have the game at home?
Yeah, I mean, you got to sweep the Mets. First and foremost, it's 2 games. The Mets are a complete joke. You got to sweep the Mets. I'd say the same for the Orioles. Between the Mets and the Orioles, they got 5 games there. You should win 4 of those 5. You get 1 mulligan. That's the worst team in baseball and the coldest team in baseball. The Nationals are what they are. They should at least take 2 or 3 there. You hope at that point those games don't matter. So I don't want to, get into projecting that game.
Yep.
It's that Yankees series. It's if they take 2 or 3 there and then just take care of business, they don't have to go above and beyond. If they get 2 or 3 against the Yankees and then take care of business the rest of the way, they should be at home. It's not about what they need to do. It's about what they can't do. They can't let themselves get tripped up by the Mets. They can't let themselves get tripped up by the Orioles. You don't want those, like, they should beat the Nationals, but you don't want those Nationals games to mean anything. Those games should be about getting lineup players days off, lining your pitching rotation up, make sure you have Chris Sale lined up, make sure your closer's ready. Those games should be procedural. And the way you do that is you take care of business against these 2 crap teams you're playing, and then you just got to take 2 or 3 against the Yankees. But how great is it that there's big time meaningful Red Sox Yankees baseball at the end of the season here? It's awesome.
I think schedule makers did a very good job with that. And
Yes.
The Yankees have been struggling mightily, as everybody knows. And as we wrap up here on this week's Red Sox beat, let's again go over the standings as we are on the off day. Here we go. So the Red Sox go into the off day. They are 86 and 65. The Blue Jays have 2 games in hand on them. They are 84 and 65. So 1 game the Red Sox have, they are 1 game ahead of the Blue Jays. But the Blue Jays have 2 games in hand, so they could make that up very easily. And the Yankees are 83 and 67, a game and a half behind the Blue Jays, and 2.5 games behind the Red Sox. So the Red Sox would really have to fall apart to fall 3 games back and miss the playoffs altogether. Could happen. Obviously, they're facing the Yankees, and the Mets are, the Mets would love to stick it to the Red Sox. But like you said, they're a mess, and I don't think that's going to happen. Anything else on your mind?
Don't sleep on Oakland. They're just kind of lingering there.
Well, they are 82 and 67. They are 2 games back of Toronto in the wild card, and they are 3 games back of the Red Sox. Yes. And they've also won 5 straight.
Right. I didn't mean don't sleep on them in terms of, they could end up taking that top wild card spot. But I would even say the Mariners too. I like what the Mariners have, and they play the A's 7 times here down the stretch. They have 7 games left against each other. So if one of those teams were to, win 6 of those 7, and I don't know how realistic that is, but that, one of those teams is going to have a chance to really climb if they can kind of get on a run. You mentioned the A's have won 5 in a row. So I know everybody wants to talk about the contest brewing in the AL East, and they should. And it's really fun, and it's good baseball, and it's a rivalry and all of that. But I'm not ready to rule, at least when it comes to that second wild card spot. I'm not ready to rule the AL West out of it either.
All right. I want to thank everybody for downloading today's podcast. Thank our terrific guest, the one and only Alex Barth of 98.5 The Sports Hub. He's a great fanboy of all things Boston sports. Follow him on Twitter at Real Alex Barth, all one word. Also want to thank our terrific sponsors, the fine folks at the Legends brand. I'm Mike Petralia, and for Alex Barth, this has been the Red Sox Beat podcast powered by CLNS Media.